Your sleep is being ruined by 5 common habits. You're having a big meal within 2 hours of bedtime. It takes 90 minutes for 50% of your stomach to empty into the small intestines. So the more full your stomach is, the higher chance of acid reflux, which can obviously damage your sleep. Ideally wait 2 to 3 hours after your large big meal before you go to bed. Or chugging water right before bed. When you're asleep, the body increases the production of the hormone ADH, so it retains water and suppresses your need to pee. If you drink lots of water before bed, it can suppress the production of ADH, so you pee more and you wake up more and it ruins your sleep. You are sleeping in a hot room. On this graph, you can see our peak body temperature is around 7 p.m. After this point, the body temperature drops and we feel more sleepy and there's an increased production of melatonin. Basically, our body needs to become cooler to sleep faster. If you're having an alcoholic nightcap before going to bed, stop. Blue line shows what a healthy sleep pattern looks like with appropriate phases of REM sleep. Red line shows what happens when you have alcohol before you go to bed. TLDR, alcohol messes up your REM sleep. Finally, caffeine. This green thing is adenosine, the molecule that makes you feel sleepy, and it binds to this purple blob, the adenosine receptor. Caffeine, this orange thing, can also fit into the adenosine receptor and block adenosine binding to it. Caffeine doesn't make you more alert, it just makes you feel less sleepy, because it prevents the accumulation of the sleep molecule. Most people that struggle with sleep, you might want to skip the afternoon coffee. Fun fact, awake brain surgery is possible because the brain itself has no pain receptors. The skin is anesthetized so you don't feel any pain. The patient's often asked to speak, sing, or even play an instrument while the surgeon zaps different parts of the brain. And if the patient says something weird or plays a wrong note, the surgeon knows not to cut there because it probably does something important. This is known as brain mapping. The surgeon will literally put little stamps or flags in different parts of the brain that do important things. This is the best way to remove tumors that grow near areas of the brain that control speech, language, or motor skills.
I'm gonna see if I can try to stay awake with 10 milligram melatonin.
This might be the single most important thing you need to hear about melatonin. The longer you're awake and active, the more a chemical called adenosine builds up in your body, making you feel tired. This is often referred to as sleep pressure or drive. And when you sleep, the adenosine levels decrease, making you feel alert and awake the next day. If you have a bad night's sleep, there still may be a high level of adenosine in your body, making you feel tired and groggy. Melatonin supplements have the potential to artificially reset the natural amount of adenosine in your body, thereby exaggerating insomnia issues. This is because external melatonin can disrupt the delicate balance between adenosine and melatonin needed to regulate sleep. And in many countries, melatonin supplements are not well regulated in terms of purity and strength, so you might not get what you pay for. If you're jet lagged, traveling through different time zones, or have a condition known as delayed sleep phase syndrome, melatonin could help with the timing of your sleep. But if you have none of the above and you want to optimize your sleep, stick to the basics. Keep your room cool, get darkness in the evening, and get a sleep schedule. This is huge and might cause some existential panic. This is no ordinary game of Pong. It's being played by human brain cells grown in a petri dish. And the brain cells are trapped in a simulation. These mini brains consist of 1 million brain cells placed on top of a system that analyzes neural activity. Pulses of electricity are sent from the simulation to indicate where the ball is in the virtual world. And the mini brains fire off neurons to move the paddle back and forth. Brain cells trapped in a perpetual dream. We're creating our own matrix. This is a massively underrated health hack, and it can save you some money as well. So there's no such thing as a superfood. That's just a marketing term and not a nutritional classification. But if something were to be labeled a superfood, it would probably have high amounts of fiber, which your gut bugs love, and antioxidants like polyphenols, found in raspberries and blueberries. But don't stress about buying fresh fruit like raspberries and blueberries out of season that are imported from all over the world and drive the price up. Instead, look at their frozen counterparts. They often retain the same, if not higher, amounts of polyphenols, and they're cheaper and you can eat them all year round. I want you to look very closely at this tiny hint of green in the upper part of the eye. What do you think that slime is? It's a contact lens, and at this point the patient's already had 2 contact lenses removed and the nightmare has just begun. What you're about to witness is a world record of the worst kind. This patient is going to end up having 23 contact lenses removed. This green ball of slime is a nightmarish daisy chain of contact lenses that are stuck together because the patient's just forgotten to remove them for God knows how long, and they're stuck like a ball of clumpy mess in the upper fornix of the eye. These are deep corners of the eye, which is less sensitive, and things can just kind of get lost in there like contact lenses, which is why you don't sleep in them and leave them in for days on end, because it can cause bacterial infections and even ulcers. It's so disgusting, but I can't stop watching. Did Pfizer lie to us about the vaccine? This is going viral on Twitter. A viral tweet claimed that Pfizer admitted that they never tested whether the vaccines prevent transmission. So all that get a vaccine to save others was apparently all a lie. Here's why that's a bunch of Betty Swallocks. Number one, the main goal of the vaccine was not to stop you getting COVID. It was to reduce the severity of the illness if you got COVID and reduce the chances of you dying or being admitted to hospital. Number two, as it happened, the vaccines were tested and proved to be pretty good at stopping you getting COVID in the first place. So if you don't get it, the less chance you can pass it on. Simple. Number three, the trials never specifically looked at whether vaccines stopped people who are already infected from passing the virus on. That's what we mean by transmission, and no one ever claimed that they did that. Number four, real world data eventually showed that vaccines did in fact reduce transmission. At the end of the day, not becoming seriously ill yourself is still helping other people. For example, if the hospitals fill up with COVID patients, that means cancer operations have to be delayed or cancelled. People living with chronic pain have to get their knee or hip operations delayed or cancelled, and so on and so forth. In other words, Twitter is a dumpster fire for news. 3 hidden signs you are not sleeping well, and they keep getting worse. Number 1, ravenous hunger. Poor sleeping patterns means the body releases more of the hunger hormone ghrelin and less of the hormone leptin, which makes you feel full. More hunger and less feeling full means you eat everything. Number 2, you're selfish. One of the worst affected areas after a bad night's sleep is the prefrontal cortex, an area of the brain that regulates our social behaviors. So this, in addition to high cortisol levels, means you're less inclined to help other people because you're an awful person. And number 3, constipation. Bad night's sleep means the master clock in the brain is disrupted, and this has a domino effect on all the other tiny little clocks all over the body, including your intestines, which means irregular bowels and human plumbing issues. This is the human version of a software update. Jokes aside, you might have chimp-like feet without even knowing it. Probably not this pronounced, but a small percentage of humans have bendy feet, specifically feet that can bend in the middle of the foot, known as mid-tarsal flexibility or a mid-tarsal break. The rest of us have boring feet with stiff ligaments that stop this joint from bending.
My daughter called yesterday and asked me if I know how to treat a yeast infection. I'm like, oh yeah, that's super easy. All you do is a little bit of vinegar and the rest warm water, and spray it down there after you go to the bathroom.
Okay, just put the vinegar down slowly and we can talk. The bad news is that vinegar is for your salad only, not your vagina. Vinegar is acidic and can cause irritation to the skin around the vulva and vaginal tissue. Douching is also a no-no. There's no medical reason for it, and actually it can be detrimental. It can disrupt the bacteria in there, making your yeast infection worse. Good news is that yeast infection can be treated pretty easily with antifungals. The bottom line is, if you find it in your kitchen, it probably belongs in your mouth, not your front garden.
Wait till more people find out that parasites actually do this to humans too. And that most of us actually have parasites, some of them this big and this long, that control our cravings and what we eat.
On today's episode of What the Funk Are You Talking About? Let's take a close look at parasitic worms. Here are your flesh pipes, also known as your intestines. So, say you had a very large parasite in there, perhaps a juicy tapeworm like this. You would know about it because it would dig into your intestines and cause major bleeding and severe abdominal pain. Not to mention weight loss and malnutrition. If you ever find yourself playing host to an intestinal parasite, you'll probably be in hospital and need specific anti-parasitic medication, not gut cleanses sold by your friendly neighborhood influencer.
Eating a banana and putting a banana in a blender is two different things. I did not know that. One day I said, let me put a banana in this motherfucker just to see it. I'm like, damn, this is delicious. I'm on to something. I gained weight that week. I didn't know what it.
Let's keep this very simple. Number 1, blending doesn't change the nutritional or caloric value of food. After all, everything is blended together in the stomach anyway. Number 2, juicing fruit and vegetables where the pulp and roughage is extracted, leaving you with just the juice minus the fiber, is less nutritious than the whole food. As long as you know that, that's fine. And number 3, consuming a blended banana is far less filling on a psychological and hormonal level than eating and chewing a whole banana, because drinking calories is easier than eating them. This is why it's easier to overconsume. This video is insane. Now, it's difficult to tell exactly what's going on because this was filmed using a toaster, but essentially that thing pumping up and down in the middle, that's not the heart, that is the lung. It's moving in the opposite direction to which it should be because of paradoxical breathing as a result of a flailed chest. There are multiple rib fractures here, and this has caused probably a collapse of the lung. That's why I suspect they are cleaning the area and prepping it because they're probably going to put in a chest drain. This is not good.
where I refuse to shit outside my own house.
If you have public poop anxiety, this is for you. The more you deny yourself a trip to the toilet when you have the urge to unload your chocolate dump truck, the more fluid is absorbed from the poo in the colon, making it drier and harder so it sets like concrete. And the harder it is, the more you need to strain, causing hemorrhoids. And the hard, sharp stool can tear the tissue in the anus, causing fissures. The resulting pain makes you feel like not wanting to go, resulting in a vicious poop cycle.
Eat your food in the right order. So anybody listening, if you're about to have a meal, look in front of you. Let's say you have some chicken, some broccoli, and some potatoes. If you eat the elements of this meal in a particular order, you can reduce the glucose spike of the meal by 75%.
Does the order in which you eat your food actually make any difference? Yes, sort of. This can be a good hack to help regulate blood glucose if you're pre-diabetic, diabetic, or have any degree of insulin resistance. When you eat fiber-rich foods first, like for example, a salad as a starter, it can actually help to reduce blood glucose spikes in two ways. Number one, fiber simply slows down digestion. And number two, fiber-rich foods have a satiating effect, so you feel full sooner, thus limiting your overall calorie intake. Having said that, if you don't have any glucose regulation issues, which is most people, then it doesn't matter how you eat your food. What you're about to witness is disturbing. This NFL quarterback is tackled and slammed to the ground with the back of his head hitting the floor as well. And immediately you see some abnormal movement. The flexed arms towards the chest and some bent fingers as well. These are primitive movements and it's difficult to say whether this is evidence of decorticate posturing, which could suggest an underlying injury to the cortex of the brain, or whether this is a fencing response, another primitive reflex, but more in keeping with concussion and possible injury to the brainstem. Either way, this is this athlete's second major brain hit in under a week. Not good.
3 areas women miss when examining their breasts. And the last one is a cancer blind spot.
Number 3. The armpit. As you can see, there's a tail of breast tissue which extends into the underarm area. This is important because breast cancers can develop in this axillary tail even though it doesn't seem like part of the breast. Number 2, the collarbone area. As you can see, the breast tissue and associated lymph nodes run underneath the collarbone area, so make sure you check here. And finally, the cancer blind spot behind the nipple. This is the human version of jet spray car wash, nasal irrigation. Although it can be useful if you've got allergies or a sinus infection, do not use this if you don't have symptoms. Your nasal passages and sinuses are lined with good slime. This is mucus which traps irritants and germs that enter through the nose. And if you keep flushing, you're going to ruin that protective feature. And make sure you don't use cold tap water. Make sure it's boiled and cooled to room temperature. If you want to break a bad habit, here's a useful tip. So habits live in the autopilot center of the brain, the basal ganglia, where it acts mainly based on internal and external cues, like emotions or your environment. If you want to prevent this automation, or at least slow it down, put some obstacles in the way to force your brain to actively pay attention to what you're doing and disrupt this automatic response. For example, if you're constantly checking your phone when you're bored, stressed, or in the middle of doing something else, try putting your phone out of sight, or turning it off completely, or logging out of frequently used social media apps. All of this makes it harder for that reflexive behavior to initiate. You're always told to eat more fiber, but the problem is not all fiber is the same. Here's what you need to know to decide what works for you. Here are some examples of insoluble fiber. This type doesn't really absorb water, but it acts more like a rake to sweep your intestines. So if you have IBS type symptoms, it might make your symptoms worse because it stimulates the gut. On the other hand, we have soluble fiber. This absorbs water and forms a gel-like paste inside your intestines. Although it doesn't have the same push as insoluble fiber, it can actually help to soften the contents of the gut and make it easier to deal with, as well as feeding your gut bacteria, lowering your cholesterol, and actually improve the symptoms of a sensitive gut, and even help settle IBS type symptoms. The skin of most fruits have high amounts of insoluble fiber, and the flesh has high amounts of soluble fiber, the best of both. Ideally in a diet you want both types of fiber, but experiment and see what works for you.